Professor Cullen Hendrix joins us now. He's a professor over at the Corbell School of International Studies with the University of Denver. He's also, of course, a non-resident senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. And the really focal point for you at the moment in your studies, contentious politics, political economy of development, and environmental politics. And, of course, we are currently at the cusp of policy making within COP26. At least we hope to see some policy making coming out of this global gathering. What isn't being discussed enough, do you think, Professor?
Well, I think that addressing the role of climate change and climate change-related migration is probably the biggest issue that's not being formally discussed at COP26. It's literally nowhere on the presidential agenda for the meeting, and to the extent it is being discussed, it's being discussed inside meetings. And that's relatively unfortunate, I think, due to the magnitude of the issue and the potential problems associated with it.
Let's talk about the magnitude of the issue. What are you seeing in terms of climate-related migration right here, right now? What is the number, the scale that we could get to?
Well, right as we speak, there are over 80 million people worldwide who've been displaced by a combination of climate-related events like droughts, flooding, storms, but then also armed conflict as well. Many of these people are in extremely dire circumstances and facing massive food insecurity. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately. Estimating migration levels related to climate change is pretty difficult to pin down because most people make the decision to migrate for a variety of reasons, and not all of which are related to climate change. But recent studies by the World Bank put the estimate at about 200 million people that will just be relocating internally by 2050. And 200 million people is roughly the population of the country of Brazil, which is the sixth largest country on Earth. And some UN estimates actually put the number much higher, anywhere from 200 million to as high as 1 billion by 2050. And even at just 200 million, the most widely cited current estimate for international migrants, that would be doubling sort of the volume of migration by 2050.
And from where to where? It's interesting that you folded in conflict within that. Make the link for us as to why environmental politics, environmental policies has to factor in the fact that this could end up into armed conflict. Is this because of food insecurity? Is this because of the need for land?
Well, it's partially being driven by that. So currently we're seeing an uptick in kind of communal conflicts, especially between pastoral communities, so herding communities, and sedentary farming communities in places like Nigeria's Middle Belt. And that conflict, unfortunately, has risen to the point that it's currently displacing more people than even the Boko Haram conflict in northeastern Nigeria. And, the links between climate change and conflict are still being pinned down, but we do have some evidence that we can already point to. So the link is perhaps strongest or most obvious in the Syrian civil war. So the drought that precipitated or partially precipitated the Syrian civil war originally displaced about 1 million people. But the subsequent armed conflict displaced another 14 million on top of that. So this is one of those second-order effects whereby migration can increase pressure on social, economic, and political systems, leading to the outbreak of armed conflict, which, of course, is a huge driver of migration and displacement.
How much do you think world leaders are thinking, factoring in the fact that, well, global instability and indeed potential for war is being driven by climate change right now?
Well, I would say that from a U.S. perspective, it's certainly being taken more seriously under the Biden administration than it had been under the Trump administration. So the Biden administration, in a recently ordered national intelligence estimate on the subject of climate change, identified migration as a potential source of geopolitical conflict at international hotspots, one of which being the U.S. border with Mexico, but also places like South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia as well. And so it's now an issue that I think, in large part catalyzed by the conflict in Syria, that is on the minds of serious policymakers, and not just in the environmental realm, but is now sort of a standard topic that's being discussed at the highest levels of national security discussions across the United States and Europe.
And Professor, there is no quick fix. We know that. But are you hoping that just the climate change is addressed first and foremost, which then stops the migration that might indeed then follow? Or is it that you need to tackle the issue of migration in and of itself due to climate change too?
Well, I think that all of these kind of stresses I'm talking about actually point to the need for a global compact to address climate-related migration. A discussion of climate-related migration was a big part of COP24 in Poland, but it really just resulted in a framework that was kind of notional commitments to further integrating migration into national plans for addressing climate change. And some countries have begun to do that, but not very many have. And so, for example, there's really no kind of discussion at the level of nationally determined contributions to mitigating climate change, which are currently being reaffirmed at COP26. There's nothing that is on that kind of scale, sort of a global compact and an agreement about how to facilitate orderly migration due to climate change. And that's the level at which this discussion needs to be taking place in the future.
Well, thank you for bringing it to our attention and making it on our agenda to discuss. Professor Hendrix, we thank you so much for your time. Stay well.